Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe, and John won't be here this week. He is unfortunately sick and with some sort of terrible chest cold that I am quite certain you don't want to listen to on your end. So I am out here gonna solo run this little outing, just so y'all can still have an episode. This is normally where we would put out a lore video in this slot. However, given the video we just did on the channel recently, where we talked about some of the challenges going on in Age of Sigmar and how people are feeling about that, we've gotten some feedback that people would like to hear about other games. And that, generally speaking, I mean, this hobby at first seems like it is the Warhammer hobby rather than the tabletop wargaming hobby. And because of that, I thought, when is a better opportunity to maybe pump the brakes a little bit and talk about some smaller games that maybe don't get the limelight that they might deserve, and to just give people some options about what other games they might consider, and even if some of the games we're going to cover on the channel aren't necessarily for you, maybe in doing a little digging in them to see if they're right for you, you will end up closer to finding something that works for you. Because there are just multitudinous games and creators who are incredibly talented making games for a variety of people. And I'm sure there's something out there for you, and I would like to at least try to get you on that path. So, to start, we're going to pivot a little away from the direct focus on the war scale of tabletop wargaming, and pivot more towards the tabletop side of tabletop wargaming. And that is with a game, Rangers of Shadowdeep. This is a miniature agnostic game by Joseph McCullough, who is a very talented creator, who may show up on this series again. Spoiler. But this has been out since, I believe, 2019, 2020-ish. And it is a wonderful miniatures agnostic game set in a fantasy universe, where you each play your own ranger and go on a variety of missions to fight a variety of foes. This is a game that does have some lore, but the pitch is vague, and that's intentional. The whole idea is that it is a way for you to have a prompt to start writing your own stories and to pick your own miniatures, because again, it's miniature agnostic, meaning you can use any minis that you would like with the game. You don't need to buy preset minis. So the lore gives you just enough to start, but it is intentionally kept a little vague so that it isn't totally restrictive. Otherwise, you lose some of the flexibility of the agnostic game. But the pitch of the lore does matter, and I think it's actually a really good one, especially combined with the art that is in here, which, I mean, I'm just kind of a sucker for really cool, scratchy line art, whether that be pencil or ink. I really, really appreciate some good black and white sketches that look like they're out of an old monster manual, and the illustrations by Barrett Stanley, who I did not want to leave out, are just wonderful, and they set the scene. But the fluff, as written. In this world, there is a peaceful kingdom of Alador, nestled between allied kingdoms on all sides. A kingdom who is a beacon of prosperity for its citizens in the world abroad. However, one day this peace is put in peril when their eastern neighbor, Laurentia, is swallowed whole by a dark cloud of magic and malice. From this horrific cloud, known as the Shadowdeep, comes horrors and death beyond most people's imagination. The king of Alador immediately calls for neighboring allies to assist, and begins to muster his own armies to respond to the threat. However, those things take time. Armies especially do not move quickly, and to muster them was not an overnight process. And that time is in dangerously short supply for the citizens of the kingdom. Because of this, a call has been sent up, asking for rangers from all over Alador to head into the Shadowdeep, far ahead of the main forces, lightly supplied and surrounded in enemy territory, to slay whatever dark creatures they can, and to buy the time that the citizens sorely need. Many won't survive, But with enough luck and grit, the kingdom just might. And that's where you pick up. For you guys as players, you will be stepping into this campaign in this world and making a ranger that is all your own. There are some wonderful mechanics to do so that aren't all too cumbersome, which we'll get to in the pros and cons, but you can make your own character from the ground up in a variety of ways. You might think of Ranger in sort of like the Dungeons & Dragons, like 3rd edition, 4th edition, 5th edition terminology of a very restrictive image in your head. And you might pull up like Aragorn or Legolas or someone like that. And you can certainly play those Rangers. Like Ranger is my favorite fantasy class, so like I'm down for that imaging and that fluff. However, the term Ranger here is used quite broadly. Instead of being a D&D class, it's more of a job. There are people who use their various individualized skills to stay far ahead of the main forces to work as a decentralized group. So your ranger can be a green-wearing elven archer, should you want. But they could also be a plate-mailed warrior who gets into the fray. Think of something more like the Night's Watch or a royal guard. Or your ranger could be a dark magic sort of warlock casting spells. Or they could be a thief using their abilities to plunder tombs. Or they could just be an absolute wizard. You could get as broad and as weird as you want. And again, back to the miniature agnostic version of this, that's the point. That you can take whatever mini floats your goat and put it on the table and have quite a time. When you make your custom ranger, you build out their skill kit and sort of determine if you're going to be a more melee-focused ranger, more distant-focused ranger, spend some points on whether you want more health or more companions, stuff like that. And after that, you go ahead, you buy some equipment, some weapons, some armor, and you take all of that out onto missions in a mostly campaign format. Which is one of the notes I want to make here, is that Rangers of Shadowdeep, you can entirely play one-off, where you and a couple of people, you make your rangers, you go off, you do a single mission. You be done, you walk away. And it works just fine. Mechanically, no problem. You gotta have a good time. It's all gonna run well. However, this shines in campaign play deeply. So you might find if you only want to do runoffs that you might miss some of the really cool aspects of survival and disease and injury and death and starvation that you get in a more campaign-oriented setting. If you wanted to like take your ranger crew and grow them over time. Then using some experience points that you're going to get to distribute, you'll put them into skills. Skills which, if you've played, again, D&D, Pathfinder, World of Darkness, any sort of tabletop game, they're going to look fairly familiar to you. Stuff like acrobatics or climb or leadership, navigation, perception, survival, etc. There's all sorts of stuff in here. And these are ways that you're going to be able to interact with the missions, with the world, and uncover more of the narrative, more of the stuff, more of the mechanics, accomplish your goals in creative ways, depending on skill checks or skill check failures. And it's another way to, again, individualize your ranger to be more of your ranger. And once you have your skills, you choose the weapons and armors, and then you get your basic equipment. You learn magic, should you choose to. Again, it costs something. And then you build your squad of companions, which is a system I very much like here. So when you go to create your ranger, you will get a number of points to spend on companions in the book. There are a lot of companions in this book. I think there's over 20 when I was just perusing through. I didn't count them before the show. Ranging from everything from like outlands, barbarians, to thieves, to casters, to dogs, to hawks. All sorts of things that you can take with you. Essentially, allies that your ranger has to go into the fray. Because while they are a ranger, they stay ahead of the main force. They're not suicidal. They don't run in alone. And it's another level of depth and creativity that you can use to make your ranger and their squad of friends or companions more individual. And that number scales depending on how many players are at the table. If you are at the table playing with 2 people, you will each have far more points to spend on companions than you would if you were sitting around with 4 people at the table, for example. Just to kind of control the number of minis that the players have at their disposal. So the less folks you have, the more companions you get to buy and kit out to go out on your adventure. Which, again, more replayability, more flavor. And on the hero side, you're generally going to have 5 to 7 miniatures when you roll out to a mission. Once you are all set up and you're ready to go with your squad of rangers, you pick a predetermined mission that you're going to then play. The missions are described in quite a lot of detail, showing their layout and the terrain requirements, as well as the enemies that you are going to fight. When you play this, of course, like, for example, in the first mission, spoiler, you're going to fight some zombies. If you have zombie minis, wonderful, put them on the table. But you can substitute in whatever minis work for you and your flavor, much like your ranger. Feel free to use what you got to play these missions. Just have enough distinguished stuff that it all works together for you on the table. Even if that is just like cardboard cutouts or little paper rounds that you move around, whatever fits for you and who you play with. Same thing with terrain. There's recommended terrain setups and distances, but again, use what you got. If it says you need a full building and all you got are ruins, cool, you have ruined buildings. Make it work. If you need to head to the inside of a temple and all you have are forests, cool, put your forests around one another. Now you're going in a grove. You can get a little flexible here, but the same idea holds the same. That you want to keep the distances and the rough themes correct so the mechanics work. However, you could get as creative as you need to or want to make this work for you. And as you push into the mission and start to investigate the scenario, you'll use skill checks and movement to look at clue tokens and try to find what you're there for in the particular mission. And as that happens and you take your turns, you will start to draw from the event deck, which is a deck you make out of regular, like, 52 pickup type play cards. And you draw from that at the end of each of your turns, and things happen. Sometimes they might be good things, but I'm gonna be honest, usually they're gonna be bad. Enemies will spawn, environments will shift, effects will happen, magic will be unleashed, stuff like that, that will make your mission more hectic, more dangerous, and more interesting. And as you get through this event deck, you'll start to push through the mission, you'll start to kill monsters, you'll start to get hurt yourself. And over time, hopefully, if you are clever and a little lucky, you and your team will accomplish your mission and make it out with some sort of loot and some experience under your belt. Once the mission is done, you and your party will tally your experience. Both, like, the actual players around the table who are playing rangers, as well as companions, also get experience. So you'll tally all of that up and write it down. You'll roll for injuries, which really can be a great time if you're of the right story is king mindset. You'll look at your loot, and you'll manage any equipment if you want to equip new things or get rid of old stuff. And also level up depending on how much experience you have. Both your ranger and your companions can level up over the course of a campaign once you hit predetermined breakpoints for experience. Now, I think this game is cool. Obviously, like, I'm holding the book. I bought it. Obviously, I like it a lot. However, all games have pros and cons. None of them are perfect. If there was a perfect game, it would already be dominating the market. It would be everywhere. Nothing is perfect. I think everything has pros and cons, especially from a game design standpoint. Anything you're really trying to drive toward in a game design, you're going to gain something for doing so, but you're also going to have a drawback to doing so. And this is no different. This game is not for everybody, and we want to try to be honest with games that we're pitching to y'all, even if they're ones that we think are cool and we like, so you can make informed decisions for yourselves. As we've said many times, hobby dollars are not infinite, and I would really like to help y'all at least try to get the most fun for your buck out of yours. So some cons. We'll start with some cons. The first is that this game runs off of predetermined missions. meaning that you have to look at a setup that pitches you a story, that has event deck tables ready to go, that has monsters ready to go, that tells you distances, and that you're going to play through and then do your stuff and then move on to the next one. And there are, I'm not going to lie, there are quite a number in here. And there are supplements that have been put up since then that have even more. A lot of supplements. I don't even know how many, because they just keep coming out. So I'm not saying that there isn't a lot of them. However, if you really take a liking to this and you start to crank through them, you will run out. And when you run out, that's kind of a bit of a problem. You could, of course, play over with a different ranger setup or different companions, but you will run out. And that's a serious drawback if you play games hard. It's not one that I really run into because I don't play nearly so sort of like doggedly, but it is one I could see popping up as an issue. And if that is something that you're a little concerned about, there are wonderful like Discord groups or Facebook groups or Reddit groups of people who put up their own homebrewed missions and campaigns that you can go through that are not made by the developer and are totally free. Some of them are really, really good, I've been told. I haven't played it myself, but I, in other games, have played much fan-made content, and a lot of it's awesome. So don't be afraid. There is a way around this one, but it is a drawback. Second, the way damage works in this game is by comparing d20s. And when you versus a monster swing at each other, you compare the numbers, and depending on the difference, you take damage. As you can imagine, with the d20 having a large range, that means there are going to be times where a very swingy, dramatic dice roll could lead to some really, really painful clapbacks on characters that you did not expect to eat painful clapbacks. And that could lead to some real rough injuries or even death, depending on the campaign setting. And if you aren't ready for that sort of like dramatic swing in your fortune, this I could see the campaign mode being a challenge, sort of like Necromunda in that way. For some people, that is the fun, and for others, it can hurt the fun. And I feel like it's worth at least shouting out. And third, Rangers isn't nearly as dense as something like 40k is. And if you, for people out there who are listening to this, if you are coming from like 40k or even Age of Sigmar, and you're looking for a really large, intricate game with just buku options out the wazoo for absolutely ever, huge army lists and rosters that you could theory craft until eternity. I mean, you can look at the size of this rulebook. It's not gonna be here. I don't think the game is by any means overly light. However, it doesn't have the same amount of rules, or some people call them bloat, that some of the larger systems have that have been running under the same rule set for, I mean, almost decades now. So if that is something you're looking for, you're not going to get it in Rangers, no matter how much I like it. And, you know, there are other things out there for you. And with those out of the way, what do I like about Rangers? Why do I think this is so good that when we said we're going to do this, this was one of my first thoughts? Couple of things. And the first is that it's incredibly approachable. As I said above, there's not a lot of super, super dense mechanics in this game, and that can be a drawback. But I also think, at least for me and the people I play with, that is an incredible, incredible benefit. The people who I am lucky enough to spend my time with and to get to see regularly, not all of them are tabletop wargamers. Most of them aren't, if I'm being honest. Some of them aren't gamers at all. And even some, like, board games are too much for them. And in those cases, I already know that there are some people that I just can't expect to play 40k with me, or Age of Sigmar with me, or Conquest with me. It's just not really their thing. It's hard. It doesn't mesh with their level of comfort or understanding, or it's an intimidating turnoff. Rangers, though, is a step in that doesn't have nearly as much sort of slack to get yourself caught up with. And that is hugely advantageous to try to get a person in who's newer to this concept as a hobby. Or, secondarily, I could also see this being used as by myself as like a D&D substitute, depending on how new people are. You know, if they say like they really like the idea of Critical Role, but they think D&D is too hard, no problem. Rangers of Shadow Deep can stand in for that without some of the other stuff. You'd have to do some homebrew, but I don't mind, and I think it would be wonderful for that. Um, and I think as a way to sort of reach out a hand and invite people into the hobby that doesn't take hundreds of dollars or hundreds of hours of effort, this is incredible. And I highly recommend it. And for me alone, that makes the game worth quite a bit. And probably worth its asking price that I got this for. I got this for like 35 bucks. That alone holds enough value for me for like $35. Second, though, which is what makes the value proposition feel more for me, is that it's miniatures agnostic. And while there is a downside to miniatures agnostic, that there isn't just like pre-made minis that you can take and go buy from top to bottom, at least not from Joseph McCullough himself. You'd have to go source them. And it's a lot of more generic stuff. Zombies, gnolls, spiders, bats, ghouls, etc. You could do it, but it is agnostic. But I think it is far more a strength than it is a weakness in this case. I've mentioned it a couple of times as I've talked about it. This game is really, really good at giving you just enough to run on, but not giving you so much that you feel restricted. And that's a difficult design feat to pull off. I have done some game design myself. It is a very cumbersome and difficult task. And trying to walk that line without falling in either direction is it's chasing the dragon. And Joseph McCullough has pulled it off here quite well. It gives you enough that you can use the minis in the book, or again, for me, I'm going to do some swaps. For examples, in the book, at some point, there are gnolls. I have a Beast of Chaos army, which I'm not going to be using for anything else, unfortunately. So you might bet that my gnolls are going to look a lot like Beasts of Chaos and stand in. Save me money and time. Why not? I've got some A Song of Ice and Fire minis of, like, Night's Watch. Could they be Rangers? Absolutely. Why not? Got some Wildlings. Could they be Rangers? Sure, why not? I got some AOS stuff. Could they be in Rangers? Why not? All of my terrain works. All of my trees work. There are just a lot of advantages to it being miniature agnostic in terms of accessibility. If the rules are accessible, this only makes it more so. Whatever you have, you can make it work. And especially for people who are trying to game on a budget, I think that has a ton of value, especially in a world that's only getting more expensive. This just is a way to keep that cost down where you can. And third is that this game can be played solo. Over the time that we've been recording the show, we have been found by folks that are, obviously, y'all, like, the show is called Kentucky Fried Wargaming. Many of the people who have reached out to us and found us over the years are folks who are from Tennessee or just a little north of us in Ohio or Indiana, places that are largely have a rural population that doesn't have game stores near them. Some people have messaged us and talked about how they truly have no game store to go play with people at, but they love the hobby anyway. And those freaking champions are hobby heroes who just keep hobbying on regardless. However, Rangers of Shadow Deep, you could play by yourself. I'm not saying it's the same as playing in a group. I've never seen a game system, especially a tabletop one, that can nearly simulate the fun and camaraderie and goofball shenanigans and chicanery that happens when you're playing in a group. However, mechanically speaking, this is as close of a substitute as I've seen. If you play solo, you get an absolute buttload of companion points, and you spend those companion points on whatever companions you want, and you can kit out a full party of 5 to 7 miniatures that you're just going to control yourself. And all of the monsters in the book, using a combination of sort of pre-programmed behavior patterns and points of interest in every mission, can run themselves. For example, maybe you need to investigate a particular building to see if someone is inside. And outside, you see that there's a gnoll guarding the building. Inside is maybe there's a place of interest in the middle of that building that you need to investigate. and the knoll is set up to sort of walk around it. Boom! You could easily control the knoll. There's not going to be a ton of enemies on the board. You know what they need to do. You're going to control your 6-ish minis, and you can get through the campaign that way. You, just like you would in a group, you'll spend experience points, you'll get loot, you'll get equipment, you'll get armor. You kit stuff out as you go, have a time. And again, truly, for our audience and for the people who watch us, the casuals or the people who might be unfortunate enough to not have a regular play group, y'all, this is great. You can still play. You could get some like tabletop wargaming fix even by yourself, which I think that's wonderful. Truly, honestly, more options for more people to have more fun is just great. So for me, I would say that if you're looking for an overlap between cool tabletop wargaming terrain setups and D&D-esque missions, as well as some really cool fantasy battles ranging from like mid-fantasy to lower fantasy, some grim tones, then I really do think you should give Rangers of Shadow Deep a go. The price of entry is real low. The amount of fun that you could have for that amount is pretty high. And overall, I just think it's a cool addition to have in your collection for when people come around who might not be down for huge games, but still want to have a bunch of chuckles. Or your diehard competitive cutthroats who you're going to beat into doing fun narrative missions while they kick and scream about how there's no efficiency. I think that's wonderful. And if this is for you, please go buy the book. It's a wonderful value, and also this is a very, very tiny thing, but the finish is delightful. And on the inside, there is like a really good matte feeling to the inside of these pages, and I don't know what they are, but it feels nice. And if you've got the right kind of neurodivergencies, you will understand pretty quickly. So I recommend the physical copy. And if this game isn't for you, but you do want to find other games, stay tuned on the channel. John will be back, and we will be covering other games and other genres and other flavors that might be more up your alley than this one was. For now, that's been all of our opinions, bona fide and Kentucky Fried. We'll see y'all in the next one.